the Plum Buttes Massacre was when the wagon train that was led by Franz Hunning, who was a trader, had a store in Albuquerque, was taking his wagon train there. He was also had special passengers, his mother-in-law and his brother-in-law. And when they were attacked by renegades, the carriage in which they were riding and one of the trade wagons left the trail, either because the horses bolted or the drivers thought they could get away, and the people in those were killed. So there were 3 deaths: the wagon driver and the mother-in-law and the brother-in-law from the carriage. They were killed in a very savage way by these renegades and were mutilated, and there was just a horrendous scene of blood everywhere. They pulled a mattress out of the wagon and it was just soaked in blood. And the soldiers who came to retrieve the bodies thought it was 2 women because of the savage nature of the attack. Plum Buttes was an important landmark because it could be seen from Cow Creek, which was the stop before the one that was at the Great Bend, which is at Ellenwood. And so from Cow Creek, you could see this great big mountain of sand sticking up, so they knew exactly where to go. Also, when they crossed the sand ridge that included Plum Buttes, they could see clear to Fort Zara, which is at Great Bend, which is 20 miles away. And they could see if that flat land, because it's the Arkansas River bottom, just flat as can be, they could see that if it was safe, if there was no place to hide, if there were natives coming to attack. My great-grandparents homesteaded here in 1878 because Civil War veterans could get free land by homestead. My great-grandfather had fought in the Civil War. They brought 3 sons with them, and they bought out a squatter who had built a sod house and had no intention of staying here, we think, because they chose this because they had a house for these 3 little boys. And they built kind of a barn. And then the survey for the railroad for the next railroad was going to come between the house and the barn, so they decided to move the farmstead to the north end of the property and built a house there with a stone basement, and then later they built a barn. They began breaking out this land where the ruts are so deep because they needed farmland, and they realized this was just too hilly, and so they left it for pasture. So this is this virgin prairie that has never been farmed at all. And when the homesteaders came, they were not disrespectful about the trail, but they weren't trying to preserve anything. They were trying to stay alive. They were trying to make a living, and times were very, very hard. Over the years, our family was always very interested in the trail. And when my dad retired, which was around 1980, he began volunteering at the museum in Lyons, and the curator there at the time was very interested in the Santa Fe Trail. And she came out here to see the ruts and was just thrilled with them, and just started having events out here. Well, my dad was concerned that people being ferried out here with a pickup pulling a trailer was going to make another set of ruts that he didn't want here. So he built a gate that's a personnel gate that is marked as Ralph's Ruts and is never locked, and you can walk in at any time. You don't need permission, you can just walk in. And so that became very prominent. This just happened about the same time that the Santa Fe Trail Association was beginning, and so some of the knowledgeable Santa Fe Trail experts were here and just thought these were the best ruts ever, and articles were written about it in the Santa Fe Trail magazine called Wagon Tracks, and people just started coming, and there were years that there were hundreds and hundreds of people coming here to see the ruts. And there would be events here where people would be invited to come. And we've continued that since his death. He died in 2009. And my brother and my sister and I own this. They don't live here. I do. I live on the same farm in my great-grandparents' house. And we still have it open so people can come in and see it. We have also just recently put a personnel gate between this pasture and the other pasture where the massacre occurred, so that visitors can go over there as well and just walk through the personnel gate into the other pasture. My husband, Ed, Kern, and I bought the farm just to the west where the Santa Fe Trail heads. It crosses our farm. We bought that from my dad's cousin after his death, and it has a much smaller pasture there that was kept as pasture specifically by the person who bought it in the first place, just to maintain the ruts. It looks like a rectangle, but it's actually a trapezoidal shape because he just followed the ruts. The ones next to the road are not very prominent because that had been filled in about 30 feet out for some lease houses in the 20s or 1920s or 1930s. But out in the pasture, there are very prominent ruts. And we have just put up a personnel gate so people can now walk out there too.